Hello everyone. Today I'll be doing a video tutorial on dynamic routing. Uh, to start off, I am going to start the React app in 1 sec. And start. Right now, it's going to be blank. I have my file structure set up, but everything is empty. So I could build it along through the video. Come on, localhost. Okay, there we go. So should be empty except a bunch of warnings from all the files that I'm currently calling but not using. So to start off, we need to set our router. So I am currently in the app file, which is the top level file in of the application. So we're gonna do hash routing. The reason I'm using hash router is because it goes well. It doesn't give you conflicts with GH pages, and that is just what the one I used during a project before this. And now we're going to call on main. Save it. So I have a state already set for name and value of name, or a state name with nothing. It's just an empty string. This name is what's going to be sent to the URL to make it changing URL within that same specific page. So if we go into main, this is where we're going to have our routers. Route exact path. And then it'd be component, lowercase c equals your component name. So for the home page, I have it just set to home. Then we close the route. So this is a normal route. However, how I am setting it up, having everything top level, having state in the top level, we're going to need to send data down through main and then from main into the different pages. And doing that, we won't easily be able to just pass in, even using props when we're rendering in the component home. It won't any props you try to send it through here, it just won't go through. It'll either give you errors or nothing at all, and everything will work except the information that's supposed to be passed in just won't. So to avoid this, we are going to use, instead of using component, we're going to use render. Copy, paste. So under page 1. So we're going to comment this out, and then this we're going to make it page 1 / colon and then name. This right here can be anything you want. I am just calling it name because that is what I am going to pass into it. So what this does is that whenever the URL goes to page 1, you're going to need something after it. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as there is some type of information after the URL. And then doing that, you can grab that specific information that gets passed in if you need to do some type of search, or if you need the parameters that you send to the URL, or the parameters that you might need for an API call or something. That's one way of listing different pages using the same page component. So instead of, like, for instance, you make an API call to look for a movie. The movie comes in, and instead of being a separate page specifically for that movie, it's the same page overall, just adding on the URL, and then since the URL is different, it's gonna only display the information for that specific page. So moving forward, I almost forgot I am doing. When changing this to render, you don't just name the component, you actually call it like a regular component. And doing this is how you're able to send the data that you need. Also, there's supposed to be functions. So here we're going to pass in props. Let me do it on both at the same time. Props, parentheses, arrow function. Now when we save, all those errors go away. Now if we go into home, let's give home some data to show. So I'm going to give it an H1. The home page. Now I'm also going to put a button in here. Change the URL name. So that button is to call upon a function that I have not made yet that will change. I'm going to make a function that creates just randomizes a name and last name, and then it sends it to page 1, and then that is what's going to be the variable changing in the URL. And then we're going to use a link. Take me to page 1, and inside the link we are going to tell it where it wants you to send it to. So you type in 2 equal signs brackets and then I am going to use tildes because I am going to pass in a string inside the string, string interpolation. So here normally it'd be page 1 slash then $, brackets again, and then in here would be the string I am passing in. However, we haven't I have not sent that yet. So before we even do that, let's go back into app and create the function that's going to send that data. So under state, I'm going to create name equals parentheses arrow function, and then here I'm going to copy and paste the function or the variables because it's a lot of typing. So I have a variable first name has random first names. I start off with mine, Alain, and then I just put random ones. There's 10 of them in total, and then last names, same thing, just a bunch of random names. Then I am going to randomize it, I'm going to use math.random. So I'm creating a variable random first and random last, and using the math.floor, which returns the greatest integer. Math.round returns an integer that's from 0 to 1. When you multiply that by 10, we get the integer, and then rounding it up or down technically, we get a whole integer. And this math.random times 10 gives us a number between 0 and 9, which is the indexes for this array. So doing that, I'm going to make another variable called new name equals first name indexed random first plus last name indexed random last. And then we're going to set that to the state. Set state name new name. I understand that if I would have made this variable the same as name, I wouldn't have to type it in the whole thing. I'd just type in name and it'd set state name to the variable name. However, sometimes I confuse myself with that, so I just prefer to use two different variable names, so it's more clear to myself. that's complaining about what we didn't finish in home. Now, the problem with this function is that problem with that function is that when it's set, when this dot set state is happening, sometimes the function runs before it's or after it's rendered, so set state doesn't get applied to anything, or set state gets applied but nothing gets changed from the render. So what we're going to do is make this function asynchronous, and then we're going to add a wait to the set state. And then in component did mount, just as the starter, we're going to call the function. But like I created earlier, I created a button that is going to call upon this function. That will manually change, reset the name variable. But just as a precaution, in case you start up the file and then you forget to press the button, one name is automatically already set. So now that we have this, now that we have the function making the name, we're gonna pass it in to our home. So to do that, we're going to send it through props. So I'm going to call this query name equals this dot state dot name. And while we're at it, I'm going to pass in the function as well. btn pressed equals this dot create name. So here I am making a variable called query name, which contains the state dot name, and then a variable called btn press that contains the function create name. Now if we go into main and we want to pass that into home and the page, we're going to go into the rendered and we're going to add, so to make this look nicer, render. So we're grabbing props, or we're making variable props and we're sending it into home. And then here we're going to make a spread operator for props to grab anything from props and set it to itself. So if anything new gets passed in, it gets added to whatever is in props already. And then from there we can go and call upon query name, or actually make another variable called query name. I like to keep them consistent throughout, from all the way from the highest level to the lowest. And then this dot props, and props contains the query name from app.js dot query name. So now this query name contains this date. And now the home page has it. We can go into home, and here within page, so the link we're sending this to when they press this button, or when they press the link tag, is going to be this dot props dot query name. Why is that? Okay. And then back into main, we're also going to send in, this needs to go down one more. We're also going to pass in btn pressed. This dot props dot btn pressed. And now we go into home, and then inside the button we can tell it on click, whenever this button is clicked, this function will run. This dot props dot btn pressed. So now this, so on click happens when the button is pressed. When that button is pressed, this is going to run, and this is this, which is this dot create name, which is this. And now in home, I save it. Why is that not in separate lines? It was in separate lines for me earlier. I don't like you. Oh well. We can cheat. We're cheating. That's ugly, but for now it works for the demonstration. So now we have the page. So when someone clicks on take me to page 1, it's going to go to the URL page 1 slash whatever the query name was created from the function. And now let's make page 1. So I'm going to copy and paste because it's mostly text. So what I did was I added an h1 tag saying this is page 1, like the home page. Then I have a p tag saying that the name that was randomly created was, and so I'm calling upon the query name as well here, just to display on the screen instead and not just looking at it on in the URL. And then just exactly that, that's the parameter in the URL. And then a link tag as well. Go back to the home. Remember, links, calling upon, well, same thing here, link. I already had it. I was already importing it. So remember that when trying to use link if you're typing it in, that you are importing it from React Router, that which is an npm install that you have to do. React Router DOM doesn't come with the basic React. Take me back to the home page. Now, I believe that is it. So there we have Adriano Gomez, where the name that was randomly created, it's not displaying. I wonder why. What did we forget to do? In main, we forgot to send it into page 1 itself. So in page 1, we have to pretty much do the exact same thing that we did for home. So I'm going to copy and paste just to make this quicker. Ugly. Close enough. So here we have the router path going to page 1, and then colon name, which is whatever string you pass into it. So and then we, instead of calling component and then the component name, we're calling render. Then in a function, we're passing in props, and then we're calling the actual component page 1. We're spread operating the props, and then we're calling in query name to get the query name to display on the screen instead of just the URL. So when we save, go back just to refresh, take me to page 1, Frank Sanchez. The name that was randomly created was Frank Sanchez. That is a parameter of the URL. If I go back and I click change the URL name, Sarah Roble. To go back, change the URL name, Chris Rodriguez. So, and then that is one way to make a dynamic navigation. So like I said earlier, if you doing some type of search and you what they put in is what you want to search through, you grab that from the URL itself, or however you pass it to the URL. You also pass it to your API call or database or whatever you're using, and that will help with the dynamic navigation. So it won't freeze on so your routes don't have to be specific to each individual search that they use, or each individual URL path. They all have that page 1 is your component, and then the URL is just something extra. Instead of using my own name, because that's one of them, hello world. So I did that, and oh, I forgot page 1 in front of it. So like I said, you can put anything in here because the colon name will take any parameter that you send through. Right now, it's still, since I am specifically sending the query name from the function, it's still Chris Rodriguez. If I go back, or not back, go to home, change it, and then I manually type it in again, it's Adriano Rodriguez. So it changed, but since the URL path will take you to page 1, and then it's your job to use that information to correctly incorporate it into whatever project you need, or for the project. So that's about it. Thank you for listening.